It's Melvin Benn. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Festival Republic. Basically, he's the man behind some of the biggest festivals on the planet, from Glastonbury to Reading and Leeds. And I know we're all very excited about Orlando Calling, which we will be talking about for sure. Guys, help me welcome Melvin Benn. I actually wanted to start today doing a rewind, actually, because your life is so interesting. Your life is immersed in music performance and music festivals and music. So what role did music play in your life growing up?
I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before, actually.
See?
Well, I guess it was the emergence of rock and roll when I was growing up, really. I mean, it was the early days of the Beatles and things like that, and it was the early days of pop music on radio and things like that. So it was all just, for us, it was fantastic. But I'm interested in, sport was as important, to be honest, really. So
really?
I can't pretend sport wasn't as important. And but really, I went to my first festival when I was 16, and I just hitchhiked. I lived in the north of England, and I just hitchhiked down to a festival called Reading Festival, which we now own, and that was just the second year of Reading Festival, and I went to see a band called The Faces, and it's sort of, it's hard to believe, really, that the way the world's changed. It's so different now. But we didn't have a telephone in our house. In fact, there was only one telephone on the estate that I lived on, and everybody knew that telephone number, because it must have been awful for them, because everybody used to ring them to get messages to people that lived on the estate, really. So I just rang my mother, and I rang that house and told my mother I was going to Reading. Now, she didn't even know where Reading is. I'd never been outside of Yorkshire at that point. And so, I guess, it was there. It was just forever there. That and sport were the potential of a more exciting life, I guess, really. That's potentially what it was.
The fact that you hitchhiked to the second Reading Festival is as rock and roll as it gets, I feel like, by the way. Very telling of your personality. I love that.
You couldn't afford a car then anyway. So and I did switch. I didn't have any, it didn't occur to me to take a tent or anything like that. I mean, you had to camp, but we didn't have a tent, so we didn't take any clothes with us. We just took what we stood up in. And what's really fantastic, actually, is that in the main, Reading Festival is exactly the same now.
Wow.
It hasn't. Of course, it's moved on. I'd like to think that the toilets are a little better than they were. They may not be, but it is really still. It's a 16, 17, 18-year-old crowd that turn up in, and it's not like here where it's always nice and sunny and things like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it rains a lot in England,
right.
and it rains a lot at English festivals, and people still turn up with, a pair of Vans shoes on, or a pair of sneakers, and they have no other shoes. They don't have Wellingtons. They don't have a change of clothes. Mm-hmm. It just and so Reading Festival, actually, and it's been one of the things that I've really tried to maintain while I've been, while I've owned Reading Festival, is it actually has to mean the same to 16, 17, 18-year-olds now as it did to me, when I was 16, really. And
that's so interesting. After all these years, rain or shine, the energy of it is still the same. That's incredible. That says a lot about the festival.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I mean, Reading Festival's 90,000 people camping.
Right.
And it's now got a sister festival in Leeds, which is 80,000 people camping, and they take place at the same time. And I always say to people, really, that probably the most exciting place in the world on any day of any year is the campsite in Reading Festival on the Thursday night before the music starts, because There's 90,000 kids there. They've all got optimism in their hearts. They're all talking about the bands that they want to see, and there's no bands on that night, so they're just keeping themselves busy. They're, you know, you're allowed to drink in England from about the age of 11, I think it is. Officially from about 18. So, you know, clearly I'm sure they've all got a bottle of beer tucked away somewhere, even if they're not quite 18.
So that Thursday night is when that community is really starting to build and everyone's making friends and getting excited for the weekend
That's
ahead.
exactly what it is, Alison. And it's just an amazing place. And I always take time to go out and wander around in the campsites on those nights, because it's just so exciting. It's just fantastic.
It's surreal. But prior to you becoming the man behind the music festival, you were involved in political festivals and political campaigns. So how did you make this transition?
I don't know, really. It just seems to happen. I guess, you know, both things are about, you know, politics have, you know, very much always been part of my life, remain part of my life today, really. And so I guess I started by my first show was, and it's difficult because sometimes I don't necessarily, although we speak the same language, we use different words for different things. So I don't know what a flatbed lorry or a flatbed trailer would be. I don't know what that would be.
Flatbed.
A flatbed. And my first concert was, I used a flatbed lorry as a stage, and it was in September 1979, and we had a really terrible Prime Minister at the time that I didn't like in particular, called Margaret Thatcher, and she'd just been in power for about 5 months, and I decided that if I organised this concert, you know, with a band on the back of a trailer, that it would be the start of the movement to get rid of her. And I'm very pleased to say that it succeeded. It took 11 years after that particular concert, but it did succeed, actually. So it did work.
Well done. Well done.
And so, yeah, I suppose it didn't quite give the instant effect, but it did that. So that's really where I started, because I wanted to make a statement about what I thought were particular injustices in life at the time. And that's what I started to do. And then really that was 79. And I guess, you know, throughout the 80s, what I did is and I'm going to say beer again, and you'll start to think I'm obsessed with it, but I'm not. But I created
there are worse things.
I created a company that sold beer at festivals and events, and I used the money that I made on the beer to put events on, and they were all free events at that time, all through the 80s, and so it was this thing where I was really trying to develop a sense of community, whether it was around a political cause or whether it was around a particular injustice in life, and it then led on to being a sense of community of people coming to a music festival that's a more commercial music festival, really. So
that's interesting. And if you think about it, politics, music, religion, they all sort of garner the same sort of passion. And
they do, very much so. And English football, you mustn't forget the English football.
That's true. I'll give you that for sure.
That's the other particular one.
So when you started organizing, Reading and Leeds, what were some of, when you were first starting with these legendary festivals, maybe some of the challenges that you faced?
I guess the core challenge, I don't know, what are festivals in the UK have become very, very much, everybody goes to festivals. Lots of people go to festivals. When I first went to a festival in 71, there was probably, in 72 there was probably less than 20,000 people a year going to a festival in the UK. There were just two festivals. One was Reading Festival, one was Glastonbury Festival. That's really all that existed. And in the main, people thought of you as being a bit loopy. I don't know if you use that word. A bit of a nutcase if you wanted to go to a festival, because nobody went to them really.
Right.
And my friends would go on holiday to Spain, and I'd go to a festival, or some of my friends would, and so for a long period, and certainly during the 80s and the early 90s. I mean, during the 80s, a lot of the festivals were very political. During the 90s, that developed a little bit more, particularly around the rave scene, where it became quite hostile between the festivals and the public authorities. And that's checked, but that was really difficult at the beginning. There was a particular law brought in the UK called the Criminal Justice Act that really sort of tried to stop a certain amount of festivals and a certain amount of mass gatherings happening. And so people like myself were behind trying to overcome that. And so that's one of the challenges. People, as much as you create festivals and you sort of think, oh yeah, people will do this, people will do that. Actually, people at festivals do whatever they want to do, and in a way, that's one of the things that you've got to do. Is you've got to create this environment where it feels like there's no rules, because that's what you're trying to do at a festival. Is you're trying to create a place that is very different from one's own normal life. You want to be in a community of people where you're with people that like the same music, have got similar cultural values, hopefully similar social values, etc. But ultimately, you've got to create this space where they can have a party, because that is a music festival, is a party of sorts. It's in a slightly bigger room than somebody's kitchen or somebody's dining room. It's got live bands instead of somebody with a terrible music taste, but it's still a party. That's essentially what it is, So.
And now that I'm learning the story about you, that it was Reading that sort of, was very impactful for you. I think I read something about Matt Bellamy from Muse actually credits his being at Reading, because he's a classically trained musician, to wanting to form a rock band.
No, that is very true. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, Muse are headlining Reading and Leeds festivals this year. Yeah, I mean, literally, he did the same as I did. I mean, he lived down in the south. He hitchhiked up and went up to Reading Festival, and he'd been trained, he'd been planned. The anticipation was that he would be a classical pianist, and he was at Reading Festival, and that was it.
That's
it was just
crazy.
like, this has changed my life. I mean, it's interesting enough. It changed the lives of. It changed the festival life here in the UK, in the USA as well, because Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction actually did the same thing, and he played at Reading Festival, and he came back and he said to his agent, I just want to steal that idea. I just want a festival like Reading Festival in America, and him and his agent created Lollapalooza.
Right.
And it started off as a touring festival and had some good years. It's now a fantastic festival up in Chicago. But it really did come entirely out of Reading Festival. Yeah.
It's so interesting, because you often hear with music fans and musicians, a certain album changed their life or a certain song changed their life, but really this Reading Festival changed so many lives and brought us so much music we may not have had we not had that festival.
Oh, I think if you ask Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters what the most important festival or event or gig he's ever done, no question, absolutely no question, that Reading Festival would be, the Foo Fighters' first ever gig was headlining my second stage at Reading Festival, and to be honest, it was chaos. I mean, nobody knew quite how big it would be, and we were in a tent, like a circus tent, probably a little bit bigger than this room.
And that was their debut show?
And that was their debut show, but there would probably have been 30,000 people trying to get in.
Oh my God.
And, you know, with the circus tent, there's all these poles, and people were climbing up on the poles, and they were hanging off bits of string in the tent. And I literally, the first gig, I had to more or less stand next to Dave Grohl for the entire performance and tell him when he had to stop it, because it literally was chaos.
Yeah.
Absolute chaos. And we got through it, and in fact it's so legendary that it really did sort of set the band on the train that to become, you know, what they are, which is a phenomenal band. And in fact, the management just literally 3-4 weeks ago emailed me to see whether we'd got any footage of that first show. And again, unlike today, where nothing can happen without somebody having it, there's no footage at all. Not one frame of footage on it at all.
That's crazy.
It's a shame, but anyway.
It is a shame,
yeah.
But you tell the story well. I feel like I'm already picturing that.
It's
You and Dave Grohl on the stage
it was,
together.
It was extraordinary. I mean, it was very scary, but it was
scary.
It's one of them, you know, rock and roll moments that
Yeah.
you just sort of, you know, that you just they create legends, really.
And speaking of rock and roll moments, I mean, you have booked everyone from Jay-Z, Kings of Leon, Guns N' Roses. I mean, there was that special Nirvana moment in '92 when you came out. I mean, every year you were actually witnessing music history being made. I mean, was there ever, or can you maybe talk about one or two moments when you were witnessing it happening and you were like, wow, this is historic? There's so many. I mean, the one you
I guess in a way. I mean, I always think the best one is yet to come.
Right.
Of course, it's an environment like this. You talk about the past because that's what we're doing, you know. But actually, I don't do my best. It just comes naturally. I don't look back. I think the best bands are yet to appear. I think bands just get better and better all the time. I don't think there's a lot of people that will say, oh, you know, Led Zeppelin it'll never get better than Led Zeppelin, and it does. Led Zeppelin are one of my favourite ever bands, but it continues to. I get more excited by bands now than I did then. You know, there's artists that I listen to now that I just can't stop getting off the CD player. That you know, I just think these bands are just incredible. There's always legendary moments. There's always great moments. You know, and where do they start? I guess, you know, you get a band like, you know, Rage Against the Machine, who would always be very close to my heart as being one of the best live bands that I've ever seen. They are politically, they're close to where I would be politically, and that helps, obviously, a little bit. But it's not the only reason. They get up, there's no frills. They just launch into the most extraordinary music, you know, that crosses over cultures, that has depth to their words, everything about it. And, you know, Rage would be, you know, very close to being there's probably 3 or 4 bands that would be the perfect Reading Festival bands. Rage would definitely be among them. They headlined in '96, and they just walk on stage. They just walk on stage. We're Rage Against the Machine. We're from Los Angeles, California, and they're the only words you get. And you don't need any more words because the music is everything what they're about, and they're not about different lighting effects or this or that. It's just so pure. So that would be a legendary moment in my life, in a way, because it's perfect rock and roll. It's ultimate rock and roll. It's absolute rock and roll. And we had, you know, there's certainly at Reading, there's a lot of people that do crowd surfing. It doesn't happen so much here, I think. Maybe it does. I don't know. I mean, of course, it depends on the bands.
Depends on the show.
It depends on the bands, and you know, during the Rage Against the Machine show, it was averaging about 170 people a minute.
That's impressive.
Coming over the barrier. Literally 170 people a minute coming over the barrier. Just complete chaos.
That's incredible.
And of course, rock and roll is often chaos, and you know, and it's creating, you know, it's a particular style of show. That's you know, American punk is a huge favourite at Reading Festival.
Right.
It wouldn't be a big favourite at Glastonbury. It wouldn't be a big favourite at Latitude, because the shows are for different people. But at that particular one. You know, there's also, you know, performances. There's just so many fantastic performances. Right. A great memory of a particular performance was, and the band. I won't talk about the name of the band, but this particular band who are huge, and they were huge, but they dropped out of the limelight for a little while, and they ended up playing early in the afternoon. They're back now. They would be capable of, you know, headlining big stadiums. They'd be capable. And the lead singer came into my office and screaming and shouting, and this was probably 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, demanding to know and describing my festival as terrible and badly organised, and he wanted to know why his performance time hadn't started and what time he was coming on, etc., etc. And I had to explain to him that he'd performed 3 or 4 hours earlier. And there was...
That's amazing. That's just amazing.
He'd clearly had one of our very special pints of beer, I think. I'm not quite sure which it was, but
sounds
anyway,
extra special.
It was an extra special beer. So there's
oh my God.
and of course you have to deal with that, or whatever comes to you. At the end of the day, I mean, you know, people come to festivals for all sorts of reasons, but the artists are really ultimately what people come to festivals for.
That is hilarious. I can only imagine the amount of stories. You need to write a book about that, all the stories. What do you think are some of the contrast or comparisons of festivals in the UK versus the US?
I mean, clearly they're different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I mean, very clearly they're different. I mean, I think that what is terrific is that there is now 3, 4, 5, maybe really good festivals here in the US. You know, Bonnaroo, of course, is a terrific festival. Coachella, Lollapalooza, now that it's in Chicago and where it is, fantastic festival. Austin City Limits, Voodoo, you know, great festivals, really, really fantastic festivals. People are better behaved in America, which is, you know, nice. It's really good. There are some things that I can't deal with that well. Coachella's fantastic, but having to stand in a space behind a fence and not be able to see a band and have a pint of beer at the same time, it sort of doesn't convey the spirit of what a festival should be, which is a group of people together and being happy to move around together and things. So that sort of disturbs me a little bit. I guess, you know, at times that the public authorities in America are less trusting of their youth compared to the public authorities in Europe. I think you know, the European youth gets away with a lot more, to be honest. And of course, festivals reflect that. I think that's probably the truth. But the other great thing about America is, in the main, the festivals take place in sunshine. There's very few rainy festivals in America, whereas in England, they all rain all of the time. It's just one of them things, really. Musically, the USA festivals have, again, I think, become a lot closer to what the European festivals are, to what the British festivals are. but that multi-stage festival, again, that's something that we developed here, over in the UK. That was a pretty odd concept when it first started. The early Reading festivals, there was 2 main stages, but they were next to each other, because you couldn't, it was too difficult to go from one band to another band on the same stage. It took quite a long time to do. Obviously, we do that all the time now, really quickly, but if you wanted to watch that band, you watch that band, and then the next band, you'd have to shuffle along a little bit to watch the next one on the stage, which was literally next door to it, really, really silly. But the American festivals, they're, great festivals, just a little bit different to the European festivals. Ultimately, the American people are better behaved than the Brits.
Who knew?
I'm afraid.
Who knew? And speaking of American festivals in the sunshine, I think we should talk about Orlando Calling. How do you guys feel about that? Everyone is just ecstatic about it. I mean, how did this idea come about, and why did you choose Orlando?
Well, I've been wanting to sort of create a festival in America I used to do an Irish music festival in America, actually.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
In New York, Chicago, Boston, and San Francisco. But they were just one-day events, they'd move around. So I've been wanting to come back into the US for quite a long time. And I looked at maybe trying to create one up in New Jersey some time ago. And politics got in the way. It made it very difficult. Then, the recession, really hit, and it just wasn't quite the right time. But I continued on my sort of search for a good place to be, really, a great place to be. And as it happens, I have a friend here in Orlando called Paul Lovett, who done a lot of work for me in the UK on festivals. He was married to, he still is. There's no, just in case there's nothing that you need to know that I know that you don't, by the way, Mrs. Lovett. He's still married to an American lady, and they live here, and he really, him and his brother, just said, you should come here, it'll be fantastic. And so Paul really is the man that sort of did all the groundwork in really trying to encourage me to come here. And I have to say, initially, again, when, initially the thought was, well, Orlando, isn't that just about the theme parks? And really it was only when I came here and spent more time here that I realized actually that it's a fantastic town. And the theme parks are a different part of the area. They don't live, they're not just here. And here in the town, I just think it's fantastic.
That's great.
And the support that I'm getting from the city, again, via Paul, the work that Paul's done, from the mayor, from everybody, it just began to make sense. And then the timing, for me made sense. It means I'm not competing with the other festivals in the US in terms of times, in terms of bands, and I don't know, it sort of feels like the most natural thing that I've done. It feels literally like it was meant to be, and that's when it feels like it's the right thing to do, when it's meant to be, and it genuinely feels like it was meant to be.
What can fans expect from Orlando Calling? What type of artists are you going to be looking to book for it?
Very American, actually. The interesting thing about a lot of the American festivals is there's a very substantial amount of UK music at all of those American festivals. Interestingly, I think this will be the most American festival of all the festivals here in America. I know, there's probably only 2 or 3 artists from the UK that I would consider booking for this particular festival at the moment. So very Americana, of course, rock, country, crossover country, very much what I think the local area will support. I mean, ultimately, very much what I think the local area will support. And I think it will be the most American of American festivals, and that's very much what I'm intending it to be. There will be artists there that you will definitely expect and enjoy, but there'll be artists there that you won't expect.
Okay.
And there will be some surprises, and I'm certain that they will. I'm certain that you'll still enjoy them.
Do you think it will be mostly established artists or emerging artists, or a little bit of both?
Well, clearly it'll be. I mean, it's 3 days. There's 4 stages at the event. So clearly the main 2 stages will be very established artists. Okay. The third and fourth stage, will be much more about unsigned, much more about emerging artists, much more about development of artists. It's something that I'm, very passionate about. I, work hard with, with young bands that I'm, committed to and think are,
I'm so
the
excited.
Next best band in the world. And I mean, it is. I mean, there's two bands that I'm listening to at the moment that I'm sure you've never heard of. Sorry? No, they're very established. No, they're great and they're fantastic. But there's a band called Esben and the Witch, and I just can't stop playing it. It's and that's one of the things, when I'm sure you have it, everybody has it, that you get an album and you
can't stop.
You can't stop playing it.
Yeah.
You just play it all the time. You can't. And so Esben and the Witch and James Blake is another one, and I just can't stop playing them. They won't work here. But they're examples of bands that I just think are fantastic and have got to get great spaces at my festivals. And that'll happen here in the US as well. Just listening to some of the bands this morning, just, getting some of the feedback from Sean and the guys from Access here about, what's gone through here and what's fantastic. And I'm sure that we haven't really begun the discussion properly, but I'm sure I'm going to try and encourage Sean and the guys from, from Access and the Florida Music Festival to support some of the more local acts and some of the emerging acts in terms of recommendations and who should play, et cetera, et cetera.
So exciting. I mean, I know I'm definitely going to be there. And there are so many musicians and students, and I know a bunch of you guys would love to be involved. How would you recommend that people can get involved with Orlando Calling?
Oh, if you could buy tickets, that would help.
I'm trying to hook you guys up here. Trying to hook you up.
No, I guess. Well, I mean, we've got a very small team emerging here in Orlando, and I've set a Festival Republic office up, or a Festival Republic office, a team up in Paul Lovett's office just. And somebody asked me a little while ago, Paul, where it was, and because I have no idea, I don't know the address. I just know where it is.
Everything's close here. Everything's close.
I just know where it is. You can walk to it, and so we'll certainly have a significant requirement for support from production personnel, from production assistants, from enthusiastic people, really, because ultimately that's where one starts. That's how I started. It's one's enthusiasm for the music, the festival culture, the bringing together of people, and if you've got that as a young employee or a young intern, then that's when you'll start taking the next step in a career path of sometimes a lot of enjoyment, but obviously I can't see very many of you, but you can all see what grey hair I've got. And so that does indicate that occasionally it's quite stressful. Trying to get Axl Rose off the stage would be described as stressful.
Yeah. A little bit.
In anybody's language, that would be described as stressful, really. So,
well, we appreciate all of the work and all of the stress that it causes you, because we're so excited for Orlando Calling, which I feel like is going to be here in a second. Thank you so much.